Good evening, everyone. Tonight's May
Recording in progress.
2022. It's about 6:31 p.m. and I would like to call to order the City of Columbus Hybrid Interactive Technology Format City Council meeting. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item tonight is our consent agenda. Would someone make a motion to approve, please?
So this is Janet. I move to approve consent agendas number 3 through 7.
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? I'll call for a roll call vote since we're interactive.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Moving on to letter C. Is there anyone here who would like to speak at the public open forum? On to number 9, Planning Commission report. And I believe Ron Hanegraaff is presenting tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and staff, and a special good evening to Jessica. Welcome back, and congratulations to your new one, or new addition to your family. She is out there.
Thank you, Ron. I'm here.
Last week on May 18th, the Planning Commission met, and there was 4 of us there, all 4. And we had a public hearing on a CUP for a PUD for Apollo Development Apartment Building, and the applicant was David Harcancho and his son Chris. We didn't have a lot of issues. We didn't come to a discussion that night. We'll come to a discussion on June 1st, but several issues came up. One was the underground parking did not have any handicap parking, and the issue was brought up to the applicants and Dean Johnson. Since the handicap parking takes more spaces than a normal parking space, 6 more parking spaces will be needed to meet our guidelines. We talked about the management regulations, the rules for the residents, and there was a letter in there from the city engineer, Kevin Bittner. It's a memorandum dated May 12, 2022 was brought up, and they said they would handle it, Apollo. And then the commission hopes that these issues concerning the parking lot and the city engineer's memorandum are addressed by our next meeting on June 1st, where we'll discuss the application. There was no one who came forth when we opened up the meeting for the public. There was an email comment from the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters regarding the Landings of Columbus project, which is the Apollo development. And this email is attached to the minutes for public hearing. And since everybody was there, anybody have any questions?
Anybody? No questions here?
That's the way I seen it on May 18th. Was it May 18th? Yeah, that's the way I seen it. No questions. Other than Rob, I got so confused when I got home that night about.
You thought I was trying to get in the door here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He sent me a text. And I got it like at 9 o'clock. And it said, I'm locked out.
Trying to get back in the Zoom meeting when I got dropped off. So can you tell him to let me back in? And
Yeah, and I'm going, why didn't you pound on the door? You know. But we had that storm that night. No questions?
Nothing. Thank you,
Thank
Ron.
you very much.
Animal control contract number 10.
So I'll report on this. There's a draft, actually a template of the contract with Companion Animal Control. This is a organization that has about 26 municipalities, mostly in the Washington County, but they also provide services for Forest Lake and Hugo. And we were directed to them from Mark Anderson from North Metro Animal Control. As you recall, he informed us that he was closing his business and his contract ends effective June 1st. Elizabeth and Mayor Priner and myself met with the owner of Companion Animal Control last Tuesday. and explained our situation, went over the contract, asked for a couple of changes like extending the notice period from 30 days to 60 or 90 days. The really, the contract is actually a bit different than the one that we had with animal control, and I'll just highlight the bigger differences. There's actually will be two contracts, one for the service of being the recipient of the calls and then picking up the animals, and then there's a separate contract that would be for the impound facility. So this contract that you have right now is just for the organization that would receive the calls and pick up the animals. They will pick up cats and dogs, whereas our North Metro facility was only going to do dogs. They also offer that they can respond to calls about large animals. So if somebody's horse gets out or you find a goat in your yard or something, they actually can come and pick those up, and they have places that they can take them until the owner is notified. So if we wanted them to do that, they would be willing to do that too. They, the impound facility that they have a relationship with is Otter Lake Veterinary Hospital in Lino Lakes. But that hospital is undergoing renovations right now, and so they're very tight on kennel space. So she was looking into using Northwood's Animal Humane Society right off of 8 as the impound facility for us. We only have had somewhere between 10 and 12 animals picked up a year, so we're not talking about a large number of animals. And I was hoping I could tell you exactly what the contract would look like, but the executive director for Northwood Humane Society is out on vacation, and she's going to contact her tomorrow. So I don't know exactly how that will work. The other difference between this organization and North Metro is that if the animal is impounded and the owner does not reclaim them, then they take the animal and work with, they have like 20 or 30 different rescue organizations, and they try to rehome the animal. So I think that's actually a big plus in my mind, that they have those kinds of relationships and they're willing to do that. So and the cost. Okay, the cost is going to be, well, I should say significantly higher than what we were paying, but we were paying hardly anything before. So our costs with North Metro was somewhere between $500 and $1,000 a year because of the low volume. And he also operated his business as a not-for-profit. We calculated that this contract would run closer to about $3,000 to $4,000 a year. And that's because she has to charge us a flat fee. It's based on the size of our community and our budget. And they do have animal control officers that would be operating out of Forest Lake, and I'm trying to think, was it Hugo? Hugo, yeah. So they actually have people that work for them that are close to so the mileage costs that they had stated in this contract is going to be negligible, because she's not going to be coming from Hudson to pick up animals. It's going to be people who are right here that work for them. So it will cost a little bit more, but I'll be honest, we don't have a lot of choices. This is the only game in town other than what we were working with. And if we don't enter into an agreement with this company, pretty much we might either not have this service, which that's an option, or we would have to work with the county and see if there's a county-wide solution to this, because I can't imagine that we're the only other city in Anoka County that has kind of been left high and dry with North Metro closing. So what I was thinking is, I'm happy to entertain any questions, but otherwise what I would suggest is entering a motion to move forward, authorizing the staff and the attorney to review the contract and negotiate the terms, so that we can get this executed, and then whatever is the final document would get presented back on hopefully the next meeting's consent agenda. So, any questions?
I have a question. We're partially agrarian, and people have barn cats. Have we ever had anybody ask for someone to pick up a cat?
You know, we've never had someone actually say, pick up a cat, but we've had people wanting to, where they know that a house may have several cats, you know, but it really has not been a large issue for us.
Right.
So how would that be handled by this group? Because it's not the same as having, a set of condos or a small neighborhood or,
Right. Well, it's all driven by people calling and saying, there's a stray cat in my yard and I don't know who it belongs to. So if there hasn't been calls like that, and I would guess there probably hasn't been calls because he didn't pick those cats up. I mean, his contract was only for dogs, so there wasn't anybody to go and take care of that. I don't know that we would have a lot of calls like that. I suppose it's possible. And if we did, then, she acknowledged the fact that in an area like ours, there are a lot of barn cats, and she said usually the people we send out will walk around, they'll ask the neighbors, they'll see if anybody knows who the cat belongs to, and try to just bring it back home and ask them to keep their cat, confined. So it would work like that, and they would only be bringing it to the impound facility if they really couldn't figure out where the animal belonged, or if there was a problem with, the animal being injured or something like that.
Okay.
And then they would be working with the Anoka County Sheriff's Office for anything that would be a potentially dangerous dog or a dangerous dog situation.
Okay. The other question I had was, do they check chips before they ship them off to someplace else?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All of the impound facilities will check for microchips, so. Any other question? Then I would move to authorize staff and the city attorney to negotiate the terms of the agreement and then to bring back the final agreement to the council on the consent agenda. And that would be for both this agreement and the impound agreement.
I'll second the motion. Is there any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, this is Rob, question on that. If they do pick up an animal and then say the person claims it, was there any conversation on how much they're gonna charge that individual to get their pet back?
There's a charge that the impound facility typically the impound facility has a stated charge, and the person who owns the animal is responsible for covering that cost. But because we don't have the contract, I can't tell you what that is.
Sure, I was just curious
Yeah.
ballpark. I think the last guy, they picked up my neighbor's dog, it was like $50, but they caught him by the time he left the city, so.
Yeah.
So,
I think they try hard not to actually get to the point of having to bring them to the impound facility. They kind of look around, they try to ask neighbors who, if anybody knows who the dog belongs or the cat belongs to. So hopefully we don't, have a rash of that kind of thing. But I know I've had, in my 20-some years in Columbus, I've had a horse or two end up in my yard and a goat or two end up in my yard. So the fact that they're willing to track those down is nice.
yeah, definitely.
Any other questions? Nope. I'll call for a roll call vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Engineers report, Kevin Bittner.
Yeah, I think Jim's going to start out on that 170th issue first.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, a couple of years ago, we started a development off of Fairman Street called Thornbeck 2, and as part of that development, we made 170th a through street. As part of that development, some of the residents that lived on the existing 170th had some concerns about road speeds and that being a through street. So we've done, a few things over the period of a year and a half or so. And one of the last things that we talked about doing was a Anoka County speed sign. I had that sign put out on April 18th for a period of 2 weeks to basically check the speeds going westbound on 170th. The reason that we waited as long as we did is because you know, we wanted to make sure that the road was clear, no snow, ice, or, you know, just cruddy conditions. So it was a good road base, and, you know, people would drive what I'll call a typical normal speed. So we put that out there for a period of 2 weeks. The first week was just the sign there collecting data. It didn't post your speed when you went by it. So it collected how many cars per day and what their speeds were. The second week, it actually collected that same data, but it showed you your speed. And when the Anoka County came and pulled down the sign, they sent us a report, which I perused through and couldn't necessarily make heads or tails of it because there's so much information there. So what I did was I sent that to Kevin and said, hey, can you put a report together that we can talk about that would make sense to everyone? And with that being said, I'll let Kevin kind of take over from there.
Yeah, so Jim sent me the data, and I looked at it, and I decided that I'd have our traffic staff kind of interpret it, because they do that all the time. So Mike Larson, one of our traffic engineers, wrote a short, quick evaluation of the data. And basically what we're seeing with the data is that the average speed of all traffic for those 2 weeks was just over 25 miles per hour. That's not to say that no one was speeding, but by and large, you know, the average of all speeds was below the speed limit. And if we were to do, you know, a more of an official speed study based on this data, and it doesn't give us everything that we would need for that, but using that data and using that 85th percentile criteria, which is basically the speed at which 85% of the traffic travels at or under, we would look at probably a speed limit of somewhere in that 31 to 35 miles per hour. So the speed limit is set at 35 miles per hour, so that appears to be an appropriate speed limit for that roadway. So based on that data, we don't necessarily see a speeding problem. Again, that's not to say there's nobody speeding, but in terms of the overall traffic, it seems to be appropriate speed limit. So with that, we don't necessarily see a speeding problem on that roadway.
So the next step is to direct the city staff to organize a meeting with the people on 170th.
Mr. Mayor and council members, there was a petition, a 170th Street petition initially, and that's what prompted over the past 2 years, looking at road counts and speed studies and such. And you've sent either 1 or 2 or 3 letters back and forth to those residents. So it would be up to the council at this point whether you felt a neighborhood meeting is warranted or whether you wanted to send an updated letter with the information. But I do think how we left it was that we were going to have communication back to the neighborhood, and I think it leaned towards a neighborhood meeting.
Yeah.
This is Janet. Connor, did you get any feedback on the letter that we sent?
I have gotten no feedback since that letter, but Elizabeth is correct. We did leave that bottom of that letter indicating we would probably host a neighborhood meeting. It didn't indicate if it was conditional upon the results.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one other thing that we need to think about or potentially talk about today or before that meeting was the residents are hoping that we close that road. And I know that Kevin and I haven't necessarily talked cost as to what that would entail, but I just want to make sure that we're all under the understanding that there is a cost to that. There is road right of way. One half of that is paved, and there would also be, road right of way that we would need to acquire for the gravel section to improve that to, what we'll call new standard or usable standards, because it wasn't necessarily up to par before we ran that through as a through street. So I just want to make sure that we're all aware that that's what they're going to ask when they come here.
Well, and I think that we had, I mean, that was the reason for doing the study, was to see if there was data to support entertaining that, and it doesn't appear that there is. I mean, it would be good to have a ballpark figure of what something like that would cost, but I do think that having the neighborhood meeting would be a good choice, because yes, they will want that, and I think that's a better way to engage on that discussion than sending a letter that just, has a bunch of data and then not be able to have that, having a conversation with them, I think is important. So if we could schedule that, I think that would be the right thing to do. I can make that motion if you want me to do that.
Sure.
So then, this is Janet. I would move to direct the city staff and the city engineer to schedule a neighborhood meeting to relay the information and to discuss the request by the residents to close off that road.
I'll second that.
It's moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
I have a comment. When we started this, this is a dirt road, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I lived on a dirt road. I wanted a dirt road. I was not afforded that over a period of time because other people did not want that. These people live on an area that the people from the Thurnback go through to get to, I think it's Potomac, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And the dirt road itself is a deterrent to the speed. I think that's why you found what you found, and that anecdotally they said that they were speeding, but they weren't, on that road. The counts of cars don't seem to be that high to me either. And for me, it's, in the past, the councils have wanted to pave roads in Columbus and just keep paving and paving and paving. And we changed that and said, the people have to ask for it now. So they have the privilege of saying, we don't want to pave it, and we're going to keep, this is keeping the speed limits down, and it's keeping the car count down. So I understand that, we want to be open and have these meetings, but I also think that I want people to understand where I'm standing with this. And I feel like we've spent a lot of money on the studies and on the engineer's report, and I think that we have done what I think is what we needed to do for that neighborhood. Any further discussion about cutting it off and having greater cost to the taxpayers, I don't think is, and it's not going to be productive. So.
No, I mean, I agree with that. I think, I just think that it's easier to have a face-to-face conversation to explain why we might not feel that that's the appropriate thing to do than to just put it in a letter. I agree, though, with your conclusion.
Will you refresh me? Hadn't you done a study also on the number of cars going through? And it was actually the same or less than before? That would be good data. That was the other part of their concern, I believe, was that now there's 1,000 cars a day racing through there. And we really found out it wasn't.
I believe I gave all that information to Connor, and that was in that last letter that we sent there. I don't remember the counts off the top of my head, but if the count, I believe it was 2014 was the last study that we did, and the counts were higher in 2014 than they were today. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like
that was right.
20 or 40 cars more per day back then than it is today currently, but
It might even indicate that traffic is going through the new development
Yes, on the paved
based on
road.
those
To go
counts.
out.
But
But I
I've
think-
spent many a days over there looking and watching and, doing investigation and stuff like that. And there's a lot of those cars that live on that gravel that go out through the pavement. It's shorter, it's paved. So I mean, there's give and take both directions. So,
But when we put together the meeting, that should be an important part of not only the speeding, but also explain to them the numbers aren't what they think it is.
The numbers, as Jim mentioned, were also in that letter, but we can have those available as well.
Yep.
Jim, is this the same road that you had to spray it, or when they rerouted traffic when they were working on Broadway? Is it the same? same complaints?
Well, so we do spray that road with calcium chloride
Right.
every year.
Yep.
I mean, not just because of that, but we do it every year anyways, so.
Sure, I guess, I'm trying to picture it. It's a road out here that goes past the tennis courts and then heads all the way out to
Nope.
Potomac. Okay,
No,
I'm
if you
confused
go,
then.
if you go north on Furman Street and you turn into 172nd,
Yep.
and then if you take a left onto DePaul and you follow that around, then you can take a right onto 170th, and then it's a short stretch of asphalt, and then it turns to gravel, and then it goes out to Potomac.
Gotcha. I was mixed up.
All right, I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Mr. Mayor, before I get to the next action item, I just wanted to give a quick report on projects. The 2022 Hornsby Project, the one associated with the Loves development, we had a pre-construction meeting recently with the contractor, Park Construction, and they're looking at starting that project in mid-June, and would anticipate completing that by the end of July. So that would be pretty well coinciding with Love's schedule for opening. So we're looking good on that one. 137th Avenue, the one with the Waldock addition, that was paved yesterday, at least the base course and the binder course, and the turn lanes were paved. At least I think the wear course needs to go on yet on the whole project. So, but that's making good progress. St. Clair Lakes, they're putting in utilities and they're progressing slowly. So just a quick update on those. So the next action item is in regards to our closeout of last year's Hornsby project with Forest Lake Contracting. We do have a final pay estimate to them in the amount of $12,654.74. And so I would recommend final payment and closing out that contract.
All right, I'll make the motion to approve the Hornsby Street final payment to Forest Lake Contracting in the amount of $12,654.74. Is there a second?
Rob, I'll second that.
Any questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
And Jesse, aye. And that's the final for Hornsby, right?
That is correct.
Well, congratulations, everyone. It's been 50 years in the coming. And it's very nice. So anyway, anything else?
Nothing
You
further,
guys?
Mayor.
Attorney report?
Good evening, everyone. Megan Rogers on behalf of Larkin Hoffman. So we have a number of items to work through this evening. And the first one is our review of the Shoreland Ordinance, which we discussed briefly at the workshop 2 weeks ago. And at the workshop, a number of the questions that were asked by council were related to whether or not the adoption of this ordinance, which is just here for you to give staff direction to send to the DNR for further review, the actual ordinance in the public hearing would come before you when it's properly noticed after the DNR has completed its review. But you asked about what the substantive changes were to the ordinance. And so I think that you can consider that there are 3 areas of substantive change. They are the variance standards, the subdivision standards, and then creating more flexibility for handicapped access from your water bodies. So those are the 3 areas where you'll see an actual shift in how your process would work. But there are no substantive impacts to the existing properties, including, I did a quick review of a number of the properties that were referenced at the last meeting. Your setback requirements from the lakes are actually remaining the same as they were underneath the original ordinance, so those will not change. And then in talking about the substantive changes, what the variance standards do is they add a number of findings, and they also tie this ordinance to the state variance standards that you typically apply underneath your planning and zoning, your regular zoning ordinance. And so those are not they're different standards that are in your ordinance today, but they are not different standards than are what are required for all cities throughout the state of Minnesota. And so when you think about your shoreland authority, the shoreland authority comes from state law. It sets the minimum, and you can always be more restrictive. And what we're recommending to present to the DNR as a revision to our ordinance is adopting that state law minimum. And so if you have any questions about the ordinance or the process, I'd be happy to answer them.
Just clarification on like the handicap access, is that like by a dock or a bridge or?
Yep, so as it stands right now, the Shoreland ordinance that's in place prohibits any structure that would allow, like for example, a movable ramp to be installed along the shoreland. And the DNR has allowed for that flexibility in its state rules. And so it's just adopting that section.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
Anyone else? Anything? All right. Janet?
Want me to make the motion?
Sure.
So I would move to approve the draft Shoreland ordinance and direct the city staff to forward the ordinance to the DNR for their 30-day review and comment period.
I'll second that. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Thank you. So moving to our next item, at the prior council meeting, staff was directed to prepare a moratorium for Lake Drive, and that's specifically within your CI district as well as your MUL district. And what you'll see is we've included a memorandum here that talks a little bit more about the policy considerations for moratoria. Now, you have 2 more existing moratoria that are in place, and this would adopt a very similar strategy as to what you've used to authorizing a planning study, and then, of course, putting the moratorium in place. Now, the practical impact of the moratorium would not go into effect until June 30th. We're presenting that because you have a number of active applications. You also have a number of applications where there are existing businesses and the city is trying to work through a code enforcement process to bring those businesses into compliance with the existing process and with existing CUPs. And so the moratoria would be in place for 1 year. It can be extended up to an additional 18 months with a public hearing and finding by this council. It would prohibit a specific group of uses only within the CI district and with the MUL district. Those uses include land, building, trade, and contractor offices with exterior storage, vehicle sales, vehicle repair, and machine shop uses, along, again, your commercial industrial district and in that mixed-use low-density district. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Generally speaking, this creates the flexibility for a zoning study of whether or not the existing conditional use permit standards are sufficient for these types of businesses along Lake Drive. And that would go out to your zoning staff. They would work on it, bring it back through for your review and your consideration. And then potentially at that point in time, the moratorium will be lifted if and when new standards are in place. And happy to answer questions when it comes to existing applications, what the law is in terms of how a moratorium affects an application that has already been submitted, and all of those questions if you have them.
Mr. Mayor and council members, you've also have before you in your additions, we did receive an email from Mr. Bruce Malkerson for your review, and I am aware that Megan has also received that email and had some discussion. And so in looking at that email and taking that under consideration, also into consideration that Councilmember Sue Abatement isn't here this evening to hear the discussion, that you may want to continue this discussion to your next meeting.
Does anyone have any problem continuing it for 2 more weeks, correct?
No, I don't.
All right. Then I'll, go ahead.
I do have one comment. When I looked at this, I didn't see that this was covering as much as I thought we wanted to cover.
Okay.
I thought that Lake Drive was going to be also protected against like heavy industrial, another concrete company, you know, aggregate crushing, asphalt company, you know, animal rendering. We wanted to get rid of the heavy industrial, and I wanted to get rid of heavy trucking. And I understand that, you know, we try to name the, like, building trade contractor office, and then I think this is not going to necessarily protect us against that. So are we gonna can we beef this up, or, because at this point, I don't feel that this really covers what I thought we wanted to do in that area. Am I wrong?
Nope, you had voiced those concerns.
Yep. So in terms of the heavy industrial and the aggregate, those are not permitted uses or even permitted via a conditional use permit within the CI district at this point in time. But certainly what we will do, so these are the uses that were most closely located to the conversation that you had at your last meeting. And what we'll do is we'll go back through the conditional uses that are lined out in the district and see if there's any other additional uses that, that could be captured. Absolutely.
And I think to, you know, to echo what Shelley was saying, you know, sometimes I think we get miscommunicated about what the definitions of some of these terms are. So, you know, in my mind, a contractor shop isn't what you described, but in some people's maybe it is. And, you know, what's light industrial and heavy industrial? I mean, you know, the city has been through those sorts of definitions too. So I think it's a good idea to make sure that we are clear on what we are stopping for the next year or so. And I would agree. No, I mean, our goal is to really look at anything that would have a high impact on the residential property that borders this. So anything that creates a lot of trucking, noise, vibration, dust, glare, anything like that is what we want to have a pause on so that we can think about, you know, either how to mitigate that or whether or not that's an appropriate use in that area.
In addition to the adjacent properties, the residential, I had hoped that we would not have as many trucks running through the main arteries that are owned by the county through Columbus. And that's, you know, that brings into question a lot more businesses that I would think would be inappropriate. And then you do mention things like auto sales and that sort of thing, and, you know, we have auto sales sort of in that area. And, you know, things that are quiet, that are not, you know, that are inside buildings, I think there was a machine shop in here or something. I didn't know that we wanted to stop that type of thing.
Well, I think that we included those things that are that basically come into question whether we want to continue to allow those uses on that strip. And it may be that at the end of the study we decide that, yeah, we do want to continue to allow those. So it's really to answer that question. And so I personally think that they're appropriate to put in here, just because I think that we want to be able to look at it without having incoming applications during that process.
Absolutely. And we can also further update our memo to include the definitions of these sections from the code. And I think that would be helpful.
That's so great, because then it makes it really clear.
Yep, absolutely.
And just a question to Megan. I think what Shelley brings up is really the policy questions as to the study itself. So maybe we can bring back a short, some ideas of policy questions that you want to answer within the study, because you have uses already established in that district, but then we can then further define and talk about what are the questions you really want to answer in that study. And one of those questions would be, what are the uses, or what other uses that would be low impact, or how are they compatible with the residential area, or really the policy questions that you want to study to give Megan and I a further idea of what you want to look at, and not necessarily uses, the list of uses in that list.
So Elizabeth, are you asking us to send you those questions, or are you asking Megan to come up with them?
I think we'll come up with some policy questions, but certainly if you have some that you definitely know that you want, then just send it to us.
Okay.
And we'll incorporate them in.
So if we don't want contractor shops down there, is that kind of what we're saying? What do we want down there? Because I can't foresee someone putting an office park next to Blake Dewatering or, you know, Wall Docks where they sell tractors. So I'm having a hard time with that. That's what that corridor's become. I get the heavy trucking, trying to limit that, but it's really been a big draw for construction companies, you know, that some of them aren't doing heavy operation. You know, they might truck some equipment in and out of there once in a while, but
Well, and I think that that's what the study will answer, right? I mean, you know, if you have a certain volume that they're doing that wouldn't be considered a nuisance to the surrounding neighborhood, then maybe we say that that's okay. But if you end up having a larger volume, or they want to, you know, crush rock or do other things like that, that it's going to be pretty tough to live within a mile or so of it.
chip up trees.
Yeah, and so I think that, you know, that's really the reason to do the moratorium, so you can really think critically about, you know, not just for now, but in the future, what makes sense for that area. And I also think that, you know, from what I understand, surrounding communities have tightened up their ordinances that have created some migration from those communities towards ours. So I think it makes sense, you know, to think about this, because I think there's getting to be pressure around us, making it more expensive or more restrictive about those kinds of businesses operating. And so we're going to get more interest in our area, and it's good to have our ducks in a row when that happens.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else, anyone? If not, I'll make the motion to continue. Discussion of ordinance 22. Connor,
09, sorry about that.
what's the number?
2209.
09, thank you. Establishing a moratorium on development, construction, or expansion of the building, trade / contractor office, recreational vehicle sales and service, appliance and vehicles and services and repair, lumber yards and sales, and machine and welding shops, shop facilities within the commercial, industrial, and mixed-use, low-density residential districts as more fully described within the ordinance, and directing staff to complete a planning study assessing the need for an amendment to the city's official controls to the city council meeting on June 8th, which will be our next meeting, 2022. Is there a second?
This is Janet, I second.
Is there any other questions or discussions?
Mr. Mayor, we're going to have to amend the ordinance number. I'm not really sure what number it is. I think that we're on resolution 9, but this is ordinance, so it's probably either ordinance 2 or 3, but we'll fill in the number.
Thank you. All right, hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
This is Shelley, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, nay.
Jesse, aye. So the next thing is the discussion and motion of Columbus Lions rental agreement in the additions, pages 8 through 20.
Yes, so the Columbus Lions have a long-standing relationship with the city and given back to the community. And in recognition of that, we were asked to prepare an agreement permitting the Columbus Lions priority registration for 9 pancake breakfasts to be held at the Columbus Senior Center. And you have in front of you a lease or a building rental agreement that provides this priority registration and also obligates the Lions to maintain and care for the building while it's under their use, as well as to operate the kitchen equipment and to make any replacements that are needed associated with that. There is no cost for the rental, but again, in recognition of the organization's longstanding commitment to the city. And Commissioner Hegland has, Councilmember Hegland has negotiated and worked with this organization to bring them back in and get them serving their breakfast in the coming year. And so I'll turn it over and can stand ready to answer any questions that you may have about the lease agreement.
Anybody?
So one of the things that we said we would have, that we would come up with before September was sort of a checklist of what we would expect them to do to meet our cleaning. Would that typically be like an appendix to this, or How would we incorporate that into this document?
Absolutely, we would just incorporate it as an Exhibit A.
Okay.
And the same thing could be true in terms of, entrance or parking areas, or, where they should come into the building, where people should exit. We can absolutely incorporate that as an exhibit as well.
All right. I'll make the motion to approve the Columbus Community and Senior Center Lions lease agreement as presented, or amended with our checklist of cleaning priorities. Is there a second?
Shelley, I'll second it.
Any other discussion or questions? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye. Get ready for pancakes. Here they come.
And French toast.
Another motion?
Yes. So you heard from the Planning Commission this evening about a potential apartment project that's presented by Mr. Harshenko. The city has a purchase agreement for that land. It's city-owned property. And this project is making its way through the Planning Commission and City Council process. And with that in mind, the purchase agreement contemplates a June 1st completion date of those processes, and we are not through that yet. And so for that reason, we're bringing to you a second amendment of the purchase agreement to extend that date for completion of the municipal approvals through September 1st of 2022.
Any questions? Anyone? And this just extends, gives us more working time to finish the paperwork.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I'll make the motion to approve the second amendment to the purchase agreement and authorizing the mayor and city administrator to take all the necessary and expedient measures in furtherance of the intent of the second amendment. Is there a second?
This is Janet, I second.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, nay.
Jesse, aye. Anything else, Megan?
I have nothing else. Thank you for having me this evening.
Number 14, mayor and city council members report. Shelley.
Okay, the event committee met once, and Sue and I had a discussion about the special events. Sue came up with a preliminary structure for an events coordinator and committee in anticipation of requesting volunteers for the committee, as was mentioned in the last meeting. In reviewing the responsibilities of the proposed committee and the chair, we decided this was not the time to pursue this effort because of additional pressures on the existing exploration committee members and the city staff. If and when we have an adequate workforce to support an event planning entity, we can readdress this issue. And in addition, Sue wrote to Elizabeth, which I will read a portion of, and said the reasons we feel we should postpone moving forward is time constraints on staff and council members. We believe our time is better spent on other projects and initiatives that we believe have a higher priority, for example, the zoning moratoriums and economic development goals. There is a gap in the park board. We feel it would be beneficial to wait until the park board chair position is filled and goals for the board established to see if the events committee has a connection to the park board or not. We also feel that with the Lions starting up the pancake breakfast again, there will be some sense of community events that may satisfy the citizens that feel the need for some type of community event. So, based on that, I guess we need a discussion first.
Anybody have any questions? Any questions or discussion? You want to make the motion?
I make a motion to approve the Events Committee report recommendation to postpone moving forward at this time with the Events Committee agenda due to the city staff and council members' time and workload constraints, allowing time spent on higher priority projects set by the city council.
Is there a second? All seconded for the purpose of discussion. Any other questions or?
I have a question. So what would be the trigger to reconsider and move forward? So you're saying you're postponing, so usually you postpone to a certain date or a certain change in events, or what would trigger us to re-engage on this?
Well, either the park board would consider doing the subcommittee, or we would be allowed to go out and get volunteers. At the time, the last time we met, we were talking about just seeing if there was any interest in the community, and from our work and putting it together to see what would be required of such a committee and a chair, we just felt like there wasn't an avenue. So I don't know. At this point, this has always been, Fall Fest has always been something that somebody has been assigned to. We decided that, Fall Fest wasn't just the only thing that we've given up in the past. We've given up, Arbor Day and some of the seminars that we've been able to do. But right now, I mean, we're short on staff. We've got 2 moratoriums going. We've got a speed study in the works, and we've got a lot of people that want to come in here and put in projects. So I just think at this point, until we get either volunteers from outside to do this, I don't see us pursuing it.
I guess my question is, we haven't actually gone out and looked for volunteers, so that's what's confusing to me, is like, I don't know kind of what the order is. We say that there's no volunteers, but we haven't actually asked for any volunteers. And we haven't actually defined what it is that we're looking for. And I agree with you that right now the staffing, this would not be the high priority in terms of trying to get something done. But that's why I'm trying to get a sense of like, well, what would change if we hired a coordinator, or if there's somebody, I mean, if this isn't going to become a staff-driven responsibility, then it won't matter whether we have staff or not, because it's not a staff-driven responsibility. So that's why I'm asking, because I feel like, to be perfectly honest, I'm a little sad that we can't figure out how to do this. But I do agree that we are very, very tight on resources right now. And I'd feel better about this motion if I could say, doesn't make sense now, but would make sense if these things changed.
Yeah, I guess I'd kind of echo what you say, if we could put some sort of date on it so that we could revisit it again next year.
Or either a date or a decision that, I don't know, that it would require an assignment of staff, or it would require a part-time events coordinator, maybe shared with another community. I don't know, but something that would set the stage for being able to move it forward. Right now, I feel like we're just kind of throwing our hands up and going, oh, I don't know.
I don't think that there's the interest in the community, and to be able to determine that, we would have to ask the community. In the past, I wanted to do something where we could get emails and we could get individuals to, receive information from us in different categories, and we haven't sent that out. We have a budget for that.
We actually do have that. I mean, when we did the internet survey, we have people that signed up for those kinds of opportunities. Volunteer opportunities is one. I don't remember 70-some people on that list, if I remember right from Jessica. I can't recall. So, I mean, and I think what we were talking about doing during our budgeting was another postcard to kind of see if we can add to that list, which we haven't done. But, I mean, we do have those categories and those lists established based on what people are interested in hearing about. But as far as I know, we haven't reached out to that group to say, is there anybody interested in this? And in part, it might be because I suggested that there had to be more thought about how this group would function before we go and ask for volunteer interest. Because, if it would take us another 6 months to figure out how to do this, then people get revved up about it, and then they hear nothing, and then they get very discouraged. So I think the last discussion we had was asking, if there could be more structure put around, like how would this work? Is it a staff function? Is it not a staff function? Is it something that we should consider a coordinator for? I mean, or do we just say we don't want to do it?
Well, based on when I told you Sue put together a structure, and it looked like it was going to take some information, or some time from staff and also somebody from the council, and we weren't willing to do it at that point. So at this point, I don't know what I can say. You know, we could put a date on it. We could talk to, I mean, Elizabeth, you know what your staffing requirements are. You know, we've had problems with filling positions, and when are we going to get to a position where we can, do some of the mize wells? We have things that we have to do as this council, but that to me is a mize well.
I think Shelley, you're right in that right now, today, we do not have the staffing, you know what I mean, to plan an event for a September event. There is no time today to do that. Connor is working on a newsletter, and the last time we talked, we had indicated we were going to put the notice for email addresses in that mailing so that we would have more email addresses to put in there. And we also said that we were going to put to see if anybody was interested in volunteering, so that we had a list. We do send out everything that, like for the park board opening, the EDA opening, the planning commission opening, we have sent out all of those flyers to that list. And to date, we only had one inquiry, and it was just some questions. It wasn't an application. So we've not received any interest for those open positions. But we will send out information to see what interest is in the community. But I agree with you. At this time, we do not have the time on a staff level to dedicate to planning an event this year.
Well, the other point is, and I go back to some of the research that I had to do with branding, and that is that any project that you take on, you need people that are, in branding, they call it champions. I called it people with passion, people who want to do a particular thing. For instance, we had people that were in forestry and were interested in doing the Arbor Day, and they handle it every year, and they did it with gusto, and they did it with knowledge, and it was great, We've had Fall Fest, and that had to be with people that basically wanted something else out of that. In other words, it was not just a community, which I thought was just a community event, was really something, was a money-making proposition for certain parts of our population, which, whether it's, for the common good or whatever, we had to make a decision, do we want to take that money and put that toward that? So my feeling is that you find people who have a passion about something, whether it be Arbor Day, whether it be Fall Fest, whether it be, all these people that say they love Fall Fest, if they love Fall Fest, then they need to, pony up and volunteer for it. And I hear these casual comments, they come to the thing, they say, well, we just love Fall Fest. Well, yeah, and somebody put that on for you, and we paid for it with public dollars. And if it brings in public goodwill, that's great. But if it doesn't, then we have to reconsider it. So my idea, Janet, you want structure. I want volunteers, and I want people who say, I want to do work on this particular project. I don't want to create the project, and that's what we were looking at when we were looking at this events coordinator or whatever, or the committee, creating it and then trying to find people to fill it. I found out on the Fall Fest that sometimes we had people that would volunteer, and they would bring things to the table, and instead of coordinating it and making it a more cohesive, event, they would say, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And we're talking dollar signs flying everywhere, or volunteer work from people that may or may not want to do that. So I just feel like at some point you have to decide what kind of community you have. Do you have a community that has a lot of people that want to volunteer and they want to be, cuddly and, come out and make everybody feel good? Or do you have a community that comes out here and they get their 5 acres and they want to do their thing, and they may want to do business, or they may want to do this, and they're not interested in getting into a group? The pancake breakfast seemed to work out pretty well, and it doesn't really cost the city much money, and I think it's goodwill. And I think you've got people that then want to do that all the time. They've got it well organized, and they're able to make some money at it too, and then give back to the community. And I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is trying to set up an artificial position or a committee, and then nobody wants to do the work. And after Sue and I talked about the structure that she had put together, I said to her, if it were you, would you volunteer for a position like this? And she said no. You know, you want to have the ability to do what you would like to do. You come, you make the proposal to the committee, the council, and they say, yeah, that's a great idea, run with it, you know, and come back to us and tell us, you know, maybe they need some money. Maybe you think, well, it would benefit the community. Then you may budget for it. But I don't believe in trying to set something up and then fit people into slots. The people that volunteered, when I saw the volunteer list, it was very generic. What I want is, what are you interested in giving to the people of Columbus? Giving them a list maybe of things that maybe they're experts in. People who, master gardeners would be one. Another would be the forestry. Another would be septic, you know, systems and how to take care of them. And God only knows we have a lot of people that don't know how to do that. There's all sorts of things we can do, but somebody has to be the champion of it. And somebody has to come in and say, this is what I would like to do. And at this point, I don't see us asking for that and then having either the staff or Sue and I try to monitor that while we're doing all these other things.
So one thought I had, I don't disagree with what you're saying, except that in every organization I've ever been involved in that really relies on volunteers doing the lion's share of the work, there is always a person who gets paid to coordinate those people, because otherwise it's chaos. And also, you don't have consistency. So if you want to have an event or a series of educational things that happen on a regular basis, you need to set it up then with a person whose job it is to make sure that that happens, and that can be a person that's a part-time person or a consultant or someone who's shared or part of a person that we already have here. So one thought I had is that maybe we incorporate this into the discussion we have about the organizational structure in our next workshop. And not to say that it happens so that, you know, it's too late to do anything about this fall, but that way you can plan, like, what would make sense? Would it make sense to have that be a consulting position or a contract position, I should say? Or is it a shared position? Or is it part of a to be hired or a to be created position on the staff? Something like that. Because otherwise, you just don't put out a notice and say, hey, if you care about Columbus, come and, you know, organize this thing, because maybe they'll do that one year and then next year there's nobody to do it. And they don't know the, you know, the boundaries that they have to work within. Someone has to tell them that. So I just to get to the point of, when do you re-engage to have this discussion? Do you think that it would make sense to talk about that kind of resource as part of our workshop when we talk about the whole organizational structure?
Well, I guess the other thing I want to remind everybody about is that, you know, we talked about having a compliance officer.
Yep, that's on the list too.
Right. And the thing is that with a community of our size, do we want to add that to the budget right now? And that's...
Yes, we do.
Okay.
But you know, that's what the workshop will be, is like, what are our priorities? And maybe this isn't a priority, but at least then you can say, not this year, next year, or we'll look into it, or if we can find someone who can do this on a contract basis. I mean, you know, Lionel Lakes does their Blue Heron Days every year. You actually, you know, participated. You and I participated in it one time. There was a person whose job it was to coordinate all that. I don't know how that person was hired. I don't know if they were an employee or a contract or whatever, but that's what I think most communities end up doing. So I just think that, you know, maybe that workshop is a good place to start that conversation, not with the intent of getting something in place for this fall, but to just answer the question is whether, how, you know, it is not going to organically happen. So if your thought is, if people want this and they need to come forward, then we may as well just say we're not going to do it and stop pretending like we're going to.
I think that's a little bit stark choices. It's not that we're against it, it's that at this time,
I agree about the timing,
as
but that's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that, well, I think that's what we have to discuss. Is it about the timing? Because that's a totally valid point. I couldn't agree more. But I think you cannot consider this something that people can just walk in and say, I'm going to volunteer to organize this.
I don't think they will, but I believe we have to discuss and decide how much time and money we're willing to spend on it.
Totally agree with that.
A compliance officer, I'll take a dozen of them. Just look at Rob's neighborhood. If we had a compliance officer instead of a fall fest.
I'm not
that mess would've
disagreeing,
been cleaned up 5
not
years ago.
disagreeing with you. My question is, should we put that on the agenda for the workshop to discuss? So that's because
I don't know what-
we're planning that workshop.
How full is our workshop, Elizabeth, coming up?
It's all part of the organizational structure discussion.
I would say to put it on there, if we have the time to address it.
I mean, we don't, again, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to shove this through so that we have a fall fest in September or even next September. I'm just saying, let's just figure out what we are willing to do and not,
Well, I think what we're willing to do depends how the dust settles on everything else.
Well, the other thing, I really want everybody to remember this, okay? We were asked to put in a person in Public Works, and Jim put together a really great understanding of what each one of those people was going to do. And he showed us what was going to be green lighted, everything that's done every year, everything that maybe will be done this year, and things that we cannot do, all right? He still had things that, cannot do. And it's not even a question of people. The last time we talked, I got really kind of blindsided by the fact that, this sand thing where they go into the well stations or whatever, okay, I didn't even know that was a problem, okay? Those types of things need to be addressed before we decide to have Fall Festival.
I get it.
The things that they're doing in the other portion, not the Public Works, but the offices and everything, we need to know exactly what's not being done and what needs to be done. And those are the things that we should be concentrating on instead of the esoteric things that are nice to have, but isn't part of what we need to do as running Columbus. And I personally feel a little overwhelmed with 2 moratoriums and a speed study and some of the people that are coming into Columbus that I'm not real crazy about, So I think that those are the things that we should spend our time on and the things that the staff should be spending their time on. As far as workshops, I don't even know what's are on some of the workshops, but we had things that got waylaid at the beginning of the year. We were talking about things that we wanted to cover, and we picked, I think, the first 4 or 5, But there are things on that list that I think should have more priority than whether we're going to hire somebody else and burden the budget with that when we have other things to talk about. So I don't really see having a workshop on this. I would much rather talk about some of the other things that we've talked about having the workshops on.
well, the workshop that I'm talking about was the follow-up to the one we had where we discussed the associate planner and the planning tech and the whole, you had questions which were really legitimate questions that was like, what is it that needs to get done? What isn't getting done? What staff do we need? And that was what the next workshop was going to talk about. So you don't want to do that now, or you do? Because I'm just saying that this question fits into that overall.
I don't have a listing of what the workshops, going out. I don't have a listing of what's on those. So I guess we'd have to prioritize the things to decide what we wanted to talk about.
So I think at what we had decided or what we had directed was that we were going to continue the discussion on the organizational structure and additional staffs at our June 8th or whatever, 14th workshop. That was 2 meetings ago, I think.
Well, why can't we schedule this discussion for a later workshop? I feel I think that's going to be a lot of issues on that one. and we can probably use up all of our time getting an understanding of who's here.
I guess I would agree on adding that to that workshop as long as it's after everything else has been discussed.
It's not a separate issue. It's the, like, what is it that we're trying to get accomplished in, and what is the priorities? And so maybe this is number 75 on the list of priorities. And then from that, what additional staff do we need in order to carry those things out? And we know some of those things, like the compliance officer is an important one. If we're going to put any teeth in any of the ordinances that we have to have somebody to enforce it. So that's going to be one of them. But, Elizabeth has been working on this, and I'm just saying that kind of fits into the discussion. And again, it may not be that we rank it very high, and it may not be that it doesn't get put in the next budget. It may be 2 budgets from now, or it may be that it's, there's investigations that are being done with other ways of getting that done. It's just one of many tasks or responsibilities, or however you want to call it, that some people think the city should take on, and so we should decide whether or not it should or it shouldn't. The part that I struggle with, and we do this a lot because it's human nature, right, is we don't want to say no. So we say, well, we're going to postpone it and we'll talk about it later. And that's not really, that's not helpful if we really don't intend to talk about it later. So I like knowing, like, what's real and what's not, and that's why I'm being pushy about this. I can live with either way. What I don't want to do is set up the expectation that, we want this, we support this, but it's just not a good time, but we don't say when is a good time. So that's why I thought we could talk about that as part of the whole organizational structure that we need to accomplish the goals that we all agree are important.
Shelley, would you be agreeable to add it on to that 14th meeting?
Okay.
After everything is done?
Well, she wants to be part of the, the whole talk. And if we need to talk about that, I'd rather do it there than here. So.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. So then, do we have to change our motion? Or just add to it, bringing it up on the meeting on the 14th?
I don't think we have
Mr. Mayor and council members, we can certainly put that we would discuss it on the 14th. However, I do think that the motion will have to stand because, or in some form, because I think that whether it's the Lions or others, they've all talked about and asked the question, and I think the question needs to be answered. And from the discussion I got is that at this time, we neither have a committee nor staff to plan an event this year.
I agree.
We're approaching June and we haven't had anything started. So I do think that on the record, we should say that right now there won't be events through September or the end of the year, or whatever date that we think that we're not going to have events towards, so that others can plan accordingly. And this is withstanding the pancake breakfast. We've already indicated that lease agreement will go forward and they will have pancake breakfasts from September through December.
So.
Well, why don't you, the motion is fine the way it's written. You're postponing and at the end just say, and, it'll be further discussed at the June 14th workshop. Then that way you have an answer. It's not going to happen this year.
Yep.
And the postponal is to discuss what staffing needs have to happen in order for us to consider it in the future.
So she just makes an amendment to her motion?
You need a second for the amendment?
So we're just going to say with the understanding that we're going to have a workshop that discusses the issue.
I would just suggest adding to the current motion that it'll be further discussed at the June 14th workshop.
Okay, I move to approve the Events Committee report recommendation to postpone moving forward at this time with the Events Committee agenda due to the city staff and council members' time and workload constraints, allowing time spent on higher priority projects set by the council, with the understanding that there will be a meeting or a workshop held on June 14th of this year to discuss these issues.
I'll second that. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye. Anything else, Shelley? Rob?
I just wanted to touch on the Viking Industrial thing. It was a very nice deal. We were invited out to Viking Industrial for their open house. A lot of contractors there from the local area. Did have a couple inquire about wanting to expand down in that district that we were talking about early, whether putting additions on or building new buildings. So I told them to inquire with Elizabeth and the zoning department about that. So that was nice to hear. And then also was by Running Aces. That is looking beautiful there. Their remodel on the outside. So if you get a chance, take a drive by there. Real nice metal panels on the exterior. And then also was approached, something to take into consideration for next year by the Columbus PTO about possibly us city council members coming out and having a table maybe next year, so they can see who their council people are, the young families and stuff, if that's possible. So that's all I got.
At what event would that be?
That'd be Columbus Family Fun Night.
Oh, family night, okay.
Yeah, I know, like the fire department was there and you know, other companies from around, but yeah. So, thank you. That's all.
Yeah.
I think I did on mine, other than we were at a lot of us were at the Eco Fund ribbon cutting, which was very nice. It's exciting to see that they're open for business and their building's beautiful.
Thank you. I have nothing to add to any of that, so
Oh, wait, I do have a personnel committee report. Sorry, Elizabeth's looking at me like, wait.
You got me scared.
I'm sorry, this is so recent. This is so recent in my mind that is like, holy smokes. Okay, today we interviewed an associate planner this afternoon at 1:30. And we did it, I mean, literally, we found out about the applicant yesterday, and we decided to combine the first and second interview to try to jump on the opportunity. And the person that we interviewed's name is Frank, and you're going to have to help me with this pronunciation of his last name.
I think it's Canaan.
Canaan.
Okay. So Frank is a he just graduated from the Humphrey School in urban planning and urban and regional planning. So he has a master's degree in that. He's done a number of internships in planning, but mostly in transportation planning. But in doing that, he's worked with a number of municipalities and Anoka County and Ramsey County. He is interested, very interested in learning from the ground up. So even though he has a master's degree, he's shy on real experience. And he recognizes that. So and he's also applied for a number of other positions. So we would like to recommend extending an offer to him. He would be hired at step 1 of the associate planner job scale, which you'll have to remind me what that is.
2545.
2545. And if you're okay with that, then Elizabeth will do her due diligence and extend an offer, and hopefully we'll have a hire. And then we would move forward with posting the planning tech position, which Elizabeth's already done one preliminary interview, so we have a potential candidate, which would be great if we'd be able to get those positions filled quickly. So, gosh, sorry, it's like, holy.
So is that your motion?
That's my report. And I would move to direct staff to extend an employment offer at step 1 of the associate planner job scale.
Rob, I'll second that.
Thank you.
So it's moved and seconded. Any other questions?
Are we urban?
I would say we are probably more of a rural planner, but in the hierarchy of things, I don't know whether planners make that designation, but I would say I make that designation in that when I look at urban planning, I look at the downtowns, and we're suburbia, so we're more of a rural planning atmosphere, let's just say, with what we do.
Do they have a program in urban or in rural planning? I mean, I'm betting not.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
100 years ago, when I was hiring people at a bank, I asked the people to look at us as, is this a good fit? I mean, I know you want the job. You're coming in and asking me for the job. But I want you to look at me. I want you to look at my company. I want you to see what we are and determine whether that's a good fit for you. And I know the job market's horrible. I mean, I know you guys are really having to look for it. But somebody who has majored in urban development and has no experience, I'm really nervous because I don't want somebody to come here and think they're going to turn this into Roseville or worse yet, Minneapolis. So
No, okay, so let me allay some of your fears. He grew up in a small town, so he kind of comes from those roots, right outside of, was it Marine?
Afton.
Yeah, right outside of Afton. He actually done his homework. He read our comp plan. He's on our website. He's looked at, knew about our freeway district. He knew about Lake Drive. He knew about Carlos Avery. He had a really good understanding of what our community was trying to do. But like a lot of people who are fresh out of school, whether it's undergrad or graduate school, I mean, you get the theory, you don't have a lot of the experience. But he's very interested in learning the practical side of planning. And I think he's excited about this opportunity for the same reason that Ben was, and the same reason that Ben found this to be a really fulfilling job for him, is that you get to do a lot of different things. You get to learn about a lot of different things, and he knows that. Will he stay here for 10 years? Hard to say. I mean, he might fall in love with it, or he might decide that it was nice to learn those things, but now I want to do something different. And there's just no, I mean, I think the expectation that people are going to come in and make a life commitment to a position is pretty unusual nowadays. So I think he's realistic about what he's walking into. I think he's interested in the opportunity. And you guys, that were there, you can chime in on your impressions on that. That was, and we asked some pretty tough questions, and he did a good job of answering them and convincing us that, this is really. He wasn't just sending out a bunch of applications. He also applied in Hugo. He also applied.
McCouncil.
Yeah. So I mean, but it wasn't like he was sending off applications to Ramsey County, or big Minneapolis place. That wasn't what he was interested in doing. So.
And too, Shelley, anything that he learns here and puts into practice for 1, 2, or 10 years, and he goes to work for City of Minneapolis or Hennepin County or Metro Council, this is the real, everything starts at the planning and zoning we do, and then they add in all the city stuff on top of it. So I think he was looking forward to getting an education here, continuing education, and
that's great for him. But it's not so great for, Elizabeth that has to train people in, number one. Number two.
Well, but there is nobody else. Either head's going to blow off.
Or we could hope that he might turn out to be just like Ben, catch on real quick. And
Well, and I think we were lucky with Ben because he was a quick learner, and, hopefully this person will be too. But I hate to see us turn into the, training grounds for, even not, I was kidding about Minneapolis, but, some of the other, urban areas around here, if someone's not interested in, a more rural area, if it's the only game in town, I just hope Dean Johnson thinks he's gonna be here forever. 'Cause, I mean, seriously, I mean, we can't do without them. So, I mean, if you're gonna have to train somebody in, I'm hoping that
That they'll last. Yeah, we all do.
yeah, because otherwise, how are you gonna do this? You're gonna do this every, how long has Ben here? 3 years?
Almost 3 years.
3 years.
That means that Elizabeth only has 3 more times and I got 5. So we'll be fine. You know, when you hire
We're
people,
chaining you to Dean.
when you
Okay,
hire
well, I
people,
get-
you're always taking that chance that they're gonna stay or they're gonna leave. I mean, you know, you have to give, everybody starts somewhere.
Right,
He was good in his interview today. We asked some crazy questions.
Okay.
And, you know, he thought about a few of them and he answered every one. And it appears that he'd be a good fit with our staff. He's green, there's no question. Ben was green, Ben caught on. It's more work for the staff, no question. But in the market today, I mean, we've advertised for this at least twice, right? And we've
least.
had nobody that is, I don't know, we'll say as good as what he is at this point.
okay.
And I don't believe that we're hiring him because we don't have anybody else. I
No.
believe that the 4 of us thought that he would be a good fit.
Yep.
Okay. No questions.
Yeah, we're not settling. It really, I mean, Elizabeth and I have had that conversation, and we can't afford to settle. So we do think you'll do a good job.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussions? If not, I'll call for a vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, I.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye. All right. Elizabeth, is Janet forgetting anything else?
No, we're good. Thank you very much.
All right. Public Works, Jim?
I'd like to just give a little update. Before I left on vacation last week, Chris and I did a little bit of legwork on trees. I had previously ordered them before that. I got a voicemail from the company, I don't remember the name, Rum River, and they didn't have all of the trees that we had ordered. So I talked to I talked to Chris, sorry, and we worked through it and we got the trees on order. My question to you is, I believe Chris was under the understanding that all of the trees were going to be planted on the park side. According to the map, 3 of them were planted on this side. So that's what you all seen, that's what you all voted on. I just want to make sure that you're okay if we were to plant all of them on one side and not as the map showed. I try to be as visual as possible and, go ahead.
And I just want to, it's kind of my confusion, but there's been a lot of confusion on this one. But talking with the other park board members on this, everybody does agree that it's probably best to plant on the north side of the path or shading the path instead of splitting the trees. So I know the map showed that, and I believe originally there was more trees, and it got kind of scaled down from what the park board originally had wanted. So now we want to just move all to the one side, and then possibly in the future, when we spend a little more money to start. And I was up at the park yesterday, and I believe, Jim, didn't they cut pine trees down or something over on that site some years ago? Or I thought there was trees over there at one point. I don't know what we're shading if we go along Kettle River on that side. We have to move the trees more towards the bleachers where the people sit in order to really do anything, so it would be more of a visual coming down Kettle River.
Right, I agree.
And that's something we can look at, but right now the park board would like to keep the trees on the one side and go for the shading of the path where people walk.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up because that's what you guys voted on, that's what you've seen. And I didn't want to do something different without discussing it. So if you guys are okay with that, then we will, Chris and I'll lay it out. I'll have her look at it to make sure that that's what the park board envisioned, because I wasn't part of any of those discussions. and then we'll move forward from there.
So question for Chris, that it was a general census that everybody on the park board wanted them on this other side, all on the one side? Okay, then I'd be good with that.
Okay, do we
The
need a
only
vote?
question I have is that the crown on those trees that were chosen is pretty big. Do we have enough room along that part of the pathway to get them all in with the extra crown?
I haven't measured it out.
I'm just
but-
saying, if,
But it's like 500 feet. So,
Okay.
so I mean, it's a pretty long distance. I believe that we can get them in there.
Okay.
I agree with you that, the tops on them are, I don't remember what it was, 50 feet wide. So I
is
mean,
it 50?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean,
A few of them, I think it was a little smaller for the ones that we had to supplement it. But yeah, they're 50 feet.
And wasn't it like nine along of the maples along that, and then 3 that were kind of over by the other ball diamonds?
I think it was 3 by the bleachers. According to the map, there was 6 along the path and then 3 on the south side of the road. We were just going to move the 3 from the south side of the road to the north side, so there would be 9 along the trail.
Yeah,
And then the 3 would still go where they showed.
yeah, that makes sense.
All right, anything else?
No, sir.
Public Communication Coordinator report.
No report from me this evening.
Assistant City Administrator report, an update on the abatement on Iverson Street and the process, and it's in our additions on pages 24 and 25. Jessica.
Good evening, council members. I have a memo for you in the additions regarding the abatement at 16658 West Iverson Street. The quotes were sent, not the quotes, the scope of work request for quotes was sent to vendors today with a deadline of June 1st to submit their quotes. After we receive those quotes and pick a vendor, we will be putting the property owner on notice. I'm anticipating giving them 2 weeks of notice, and then we will perform the work. Happy to answer any other questions if you guys have any. Just wanted to give you that brief update.
Jessica, Rob here. Is there any update on like the junk that's in the yard?
I anticipated that question. I haven't heard I haven't heard much about it other than I'm not sure where you guys are at in terms of what you've heard, but the homeowner was a no-show on their most recent court date for the junk issue. So I don't know how that all works. We'd have to get Joe Murphy on a phone call to figure out what happens next. I think there's a bench warrant out for him right now. So I believe it would be possible if the council so chooses to direct us in this direction to pursue abatement of the junk vehicles as well. But I'm kind of seeing this as like a 2-track thing right now, that the junk vehicles were on one track pursuing the courts and the swimming pool was on another track with abatement. So I don't know enough about criminal law and procedure to tell you what happens when they don't show up for their final court date.
Thank you, Jessica.
So I think
Yeah.
Elizabeth was going to contact Joe to get further direction, but I also think that in order for us, and I would like to have us move towards an abatement process for the junk, because clearly the court system isn't working so well on getting it done, but I believe there's some updates we need to do. So I think get some further feedback from Joe Murphy, and then figure out what we need to do to the ordinance to get the abatement clauses in good shape so we can move forward with that on the junk process.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
just the second page of my memo was a general process of the abatement procedure that as it currently stands in our ordinance, it's a little lengthy. There's 14 steps. But at least we have that process written down so that hopefully when we pursue this with the junk vehicles, it'll be a little bit quicker. And working on the abatement ordinance itself is on my to-do list. Elizabeth and I talked about that today. So that is something that you can expect to see in the future, is some amendments to that. I'm guessing that we want to give it more teeth and give the city a broader range of options when this kind of stuff happens.
I guess on the topic too, I would add that it has gotten, hasn't gotten better, it has gotten worse. In that several neighbors stop by on a regular basis to ask me what's going on. I know Janet, I just got at it on an email strain with you. So yeah, it's a big concern. Obviously we all know, so thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, you're welcome. And right now I'm looking at that last week in June for actually performing the work. If everything kind of goes according to plan, we're hoping to get a vendor in there the last week of June to get the fence put up. It would be a 5-foot non-climbable fence. The cost will be billed to the property owner, and if they do not remit funds to the city, the amount will be added to their property taxes. So there aren't any other questions. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
I have a question, are the property, if they're added to the property tax, in 1 year, or does it like spread over?
I think it's just in 1 year, similar to what we did with the utilities issue, that water bill that we did.
Okay.
It just goes on the next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. City Administrator's report.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I have no report this evening.
All right. Announcements and reminders. The Planning Commission will meet on June 1st at 6:30. It's hard to believe it's June already. City Council will be on the 8th at 6:30 in the City Workshop on the 14th at 5:30. The meetings are all in the back. Would someone like to make the motion to adjourn?
This is Jan, I move to adjourn.
It's Rob, I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. I'll call for the vote.
Shelley, aye.
Janet, aye.
Rob, aye.
Jesse, aye. Our meeting is adjourned.
Recording stopped.